chair of the MIT Enterprise Forum of Atlanta, and we're really thrilled to welcome you to tonight's program on Media Disrupted, Reinventing the Industry Through Technology, Innovation, and Investment, with our panel of leaders from the media industry. We're also very excited to be co-hosting this event with Women in Cable Telecommunications, which has been a great partner for us, and we really appreciate them extending invites to many notable folks in the media community. For those of you who are not familiar, I will take just a moment to tell you a little bit about the MIT Enterprise Forum. We've been around for 15 years, and we're part of a network of 26 chapters worldwide. Our mission is to inform, connect, and coach technology entrepreneurs, enabling them to rapidly transform ideas into world-changing companies. Here in the Southeast, we're really focused on putting together educational programs like this that are at the intersection of technology and business. And while we are personally affiliated with the MIT Technology Review, which if you have not checked it out, you absolutely should. It's the oldest technology publication still in circulation. Importantly for our guests this evening, to volunteer or attend our events, affiliation with MIT is not required. Information about upcoming programs on our side can be found in your programs this evening, so please definitely check that out. And before I turn it over to our distinguished moderator this evening, I did want to take just a moment to thank our annual sponsors who help make this programming possible. First, I would like to thank our annual platinum sponsor, Sutherland. And I would also like to thank our annual gold sponsors, which include Alston & Bird, Cherry Beckert, Miller Martin, Silicon Valley Bank, Baker Donaldson, Archetti Group, Trinet, CBRE, TransPerfect, Acuity Complete, and Velicent. And I will now turn the podium over to Lori Baird, who will be serving as tonight's moderator.
We're delighted to be here tonight in partnership with the MIT Enterprise Forum. It's been a really fun few months planning this event, and I think it's going to be a great event at the intersection of both of our organizations. Before I introduce our panelists, I do want to give you our two-second blurb on WIT, because probably half of you have never heard of us. So we're not WIT. Many of you in Atlanta know WIT, but we are Women in Cable Telecommunications. We are part of a national organization with one international chapter in England. There are 19 of us. We have about 10,000 members nationally, 1,100 in the Southeast. Our Southeast region is Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama, and we are concentrated our activities in Atlanta, Nashville, and Knoxville. Moving on, because you've probably seen all of that here, I do want to thank our annual sponsors. One of the things that we share with MIT Enterprise Forum is that if you join, our events are free, except for those that we are doing as fundraisers. And we do that based on the support of our great sponsors. So I do want to thank our 2015 sponsors. At the exclusive red level is Comcast and Wargo French. And we also have Eris, Turner, Cox Scripps, HBO, The Weather Channel, and Stars. So please, if you see folks, thank them. I'm really appreciative of them. With that, I'm going to invite my panelists up and move over to start our discussion. Tonight we're here to talk about media disruption, and I'm pleased to have this fantastic panel with us. Everybody on this panel has had deep roots into the content and business side of the media industry, of what you would think of as what you watch on television. Not everybody is still in that side of it, in what the Turners and the weather channels of the world. Great people on the panel, but I was talking to my friend Laura Ring, who's also helping do the event planning, and she mentioned that some of the folks in the audience may not be familiar with our industry, and we tend to talk about it flippantly. We seem to know and assume everyone does. So I just wanted to go through a couple of numbers, MIT's number people. So if you think about the U.S. household, the U.S. Census says that for 2013 there were about 116 million households. And in our industry, we do a lot by households, crunching numbers there. If you look at subscription TV households, projected this year from PwC Global Entertainment Outlook is about 103 million subscription households. If you think about your broadband, what you have at home, about 113. If you think about how many mobile phones there are in the U.S., about 350 million. So kind of gives you a little bit of a ballpark for where we are. Many of you are paying for your television, some not, some of you have disconnected, but those who are, TV subscriptions are about 100 billion industry in the US. If you look at over-the-top streaming, which has often been thought of as cutting the cords and how do you get your content if you're not going to go directly through your cable or satellite or IPTV, That's only about a $10 billion market. So if you think about $100 billion to $10 billion, it's a small part of a big way of getting content to you. Some people may be surprised, but in this industry, there are two primary revenue sources. One is that subscription you're paying if you're paying for a Comcast or a Time Warner Cable. The other is advertising, and advertising is a big part of making sure that you get content to your home. That's almost, depending on the company, could be half the revenues. In some cases, it's zero. In some cases, as an over-the-air, it's all of the revenues associated with the content you're seeing. If you looked at the cable systems, the networks and the providers, about $25 billion a year market. The terrestrial broadcast networks and the television stations that you could get with your rabbit ears is probably about $35 billion. And online, or looking at the total TV advertising revenue, about $65 billion. Those are rough numbers. You guys might have some other numbers, but it's ballpark. If you think about mobile and wired advertising, so things you're getting on your cell phone or you're getting on the internet, that's about a $52 billion advertising market. So the market you're seeing in advertising in this content world is greater than that. So anyway, that was just sort of a grounding to give you an idea of where we are. I wanted to talk to the panel tonight. Everybody here is doing things in what we call a cross-platform, a multi-platform, that getting something to your television in your home is just one piece of that. But I wanted to start out by introducing my panelists. So to my right, your left, is Guy Primus. And Guy has many, many hats. So we're extremely thrilled to have him here tonight. He's a serial entrepreneur, an investor. He's been part of the media.
I have ADD.
You have ADD?
Yeah.
Yes. Doing some crazy, wonderful things. Deep roots here to Georgia Tech. We've invited him to sort of represent the money, but he's actually a really crazy thinker. Still can't hear me. Okay. I think I'm moving around too much. All right. Let me... Okay, we'll try that. Sorry. Thank you. Is that working? Fantastic.
Good job.
Sorry, I know. I think I would know this stuff. Apologies. Okay. So anyway, Guy is also has recently launched, or is in the process of launching a virtual reality company, which, if you don't know what virtual reality is, he'll tell us a little bit about it. But it's seeing things that the Oculus Rift or other devices that immerse you in it. So it's not something you watch on television, but it's the crazy frontier. So we'll get Guy to talk about that. Next to that, we have Jonathan Cates. And Jonathan is the CEO of Cates Broadcasting and the COO of Bounce TV. These are, well, he'll tell us a bit about the models for there, but let me tell you, he's launched 3 broadcast networks in less than a year, and another one coming in a few weeks. So when people think that the industry is dying or people are moving online, Jonathan's here to tell us that that's not quite true. We have Nikki Santoro is here from the Weather Channel. And Nikki is the VP for product development, so she's responsible for the way that we see most of our weather content, which is through mobile and on the digital platforms. So in addition to supporting what's on the linear broadcast, she's here to talk about all the new ways of connecting with content. Next up, we have Katie Buchanan. Katie came down today from Nashville, where she is SVP at CMT, what I would say is Country Music TV, and that's a Viacom company, so you may have that. It's probably about 80 million homes that have that. So she kind of represents our traditional media, although her role is really to get all sorts of touch points. And then at the far end, we have David Rudolph. And David is also an entrepreneur. He is the CEO of Play On Sports, which is a digital play for with user-generated content and everything else, a premier network for sports at the high school level. So, welcome, folks. Now, time to get you guys talking. What do you see? I'm going to start out by throwing this to the panel. I've given you my view, a very academic view of what the industry is, but what is your product? And I'm going to start actually with David and move forward. What do you see as, what is it that you are offering to a fan?
Yep, so this is I like many in the room and several on the panel, I'm a recovering Turner employee. But This was a business we started 9 years ago inside of Turner, and the core product we were trying to develop at the time, and what we still do today, is how do we produce and distribute untelevised sporting events? That there's a certain segment of sports that are great for TV. You know them all well, starting at the Super Bowl down to the professional teams. But that represents a very small fraction of the total sports that are produced in the country. So as this new thing 10 years ago called the internet started coming along and people told me that you could put video on it, what we basically do is we provide a way for people to watch sporting events that they're interested in that they otherwise can't attend in person. So whether that's an away game that you want to see or whether that's a home game that you can't make because you're at work or you're traveling, that's the product that we provide. So people are passionate about sports, not only their professional teams and their college teams, but they're also passionate about their high school and their kids' activity. So that's the core product and value proposition that we provide to consumers.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, so it's a little bit unique at CMT because I think our value is twofold, just in terms of, you think about the networks and the portfolio of the Viacom family, and you've got MTV, you've got VH1, you've got Logo, MTV2, Spike TV Land, etc. The music networks, even MTV and VH1 anymore, we like to say that CMT is still core music. It's in our DNA. So we kind of have a twofold product where it's all about bringing the hottest country artists in front of our audience and sort of emulating the spirit of what you see in the videos and in sort of the vibe of country music today in our programming. So whether it's loud characters, over-the-top reality shows, big eventized award shows that sync up every year with our music awards. So I'd say it's twofold consistently.
Try to just. Okay, we'll just pass the mic around.
Well, Oprah.
Yeah, exactly. How about now? Is it better? Okay, super. So at I work at the Weather Channel. I'm on the digital side, so you won't see me in front of a camera. Although I did make one appearance that was very exciting, one morning show I got to be on to talk about one of our app launches. But I do work on most of the mobile side. Our goal is to provide our fans with a way to plan their everyday lives. Weather is all around us. It impacts every day. And we want to keep them safe, and we want them to be able to get outside and enjoy the weather, right? Whether that means, finding the best day to go play their favorite sports or understanding how the weather is going to impact their health. And so we have both our digital properties on the web and on mobile. My primary focus is on mobile. The Weather Channel is now a mobile-led company, and so we are mobile first. So a lot of our platforms are moving that way, even our content offerings. So we have a balance of making sure that you have the data and information you need to plan your lives, and balancing that with a fantastic weather storytelling. I think that's a great history of our company and something that we bring forward even on the digital side. So.
Thank you. I use your app every day.
Yes.
It's amazing out there.
Excellent.
So what these guys do, including CMT, is, they're in this digital streaming over-the-top business, which is really, really sexy. But along with these opportunities come other adjacencies, other gaps in the marketplace. And case in point, over the top is actually driving what we call traditional broadcast over-the-air adoption. And it's a pretty simple story. You love Netflix, you hate your cable bill, you decide to cut the cord, but you still want to watch the NFL or Blacklist or Empire, and so you go and buy an antenna. And when you do, you discover there's a whole universe of channels very similar to the early days of cable. So it's our job, and what we've done, is to create a portfolio of networks that answer specific needs, gaps in the marketplace to entertain consumers. And we think we do a pretty good job on the execution.
Well, let me start off by asking a question. How many of you guys are familiar with virtual reality or Oculus Rift? Okay, a fair amount. Wow, okay. I didn't expect that many. So Atlanta's definitely ahead of the curve. So what my company does, and actually we're in the kind of process of just starting the company and just launching the company, but what we do is actually create extraordinary entertainment art for Oculus Rift and other like devices. So really what our goal is to be is the ABC or the Disney for virtual reality content. We don't want to do the kind of small pieces, the museum pieces. We don't want to do the art pieces. We don't want to do the cheesy kind of backyard videos. We want to really do tentpole films, content pieces like that. We want to do extraordinary sports, probably stories more so than the live sporting events. But ultimately we want to leverage the 180 million people that will be using these devices in 2018 and deliver extraordinary content to them for these devices.
I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit deeper and talk about how does this business work. People have heard a lot about user-generated content. There's been a lot of digital studios. Could each of you kind of talk a little bit about where is content created and is there room for innovation or new ideas or new partnerships there?
Well, I'll just start, and again, if we're going to do this all night, I'll keep it brief. So we absolutely, our content is created in two ways. One is through these cameras, which you may have seen. They look like kind of orbs with, probably 16 or 30 different lenses on them, and then they shoot in every direction. And that's how you can produce live action content. The other way is kind of cameras in the corners that kind of capture the entire room and kind of point so you can get kind of depth of field. And so that's the first way. And the other way is through computer-generated content. So my co-founder, a guy named Robert Stromberg, he has 2 Academy Awards, one for Avatar and one for Alice in Wonderland. He's the biggest first-time director in the history of Hollywood. When he saw virtual reality, he said, you know what, I don't want to do movies anymore. I'm walking away. I only want to do virtual reality content. And so his forte is in this computer-generated graphics world. So there's absolutely ability to innovate, and the distribution is a piece that we're figuring out right now. And so we actually have we're developing a joint venture partnership with a company called RSA, which is Ridley Scott's commercial production company. And we think that advertisers and brands are going to be kind of lead the charge into virtual reality, and that's where the majority of the money is going to come from initially.
I don't know about you guys, but I'd be happy just to talk about Oculus Rift for the rest of this session. What we do, because as David put it, for the most part, 90% of our staff is external broadcasting. What we do is we apply a cable lens on how you develop brands and how you program in a broadcast world. So the content for us is very traditional. For the most part, we're talking about major studio, theatricals, series, but then we have original programming that we produce for Bounce, and there's original short-form digital for Laugh. So kind of all over the place, but you can go from an example of Funny or Die on the digital side, which is kind of comparable to what Laugh will be, to TBS, which is really Laugh linear, or Bounce, which is the first African-American broadcast network, so somewhere between TV1 and BET. So you get the idea in terms of content, but it's acquired and original on all platforms.
Well, I will tell a similar story at the Weather Channel on the digital side. Of course, it is a combination. It's not just one way that we do storytelling. So you can have anything from amazing documentaries on the real Death Valley, which is incredibly impactful, all the way to watching a baby react to Jim Cantor get really excited about thunderstorms. And that's okay. It's all part of the delighting our fans with great variety of content. So the thing that I would tell you is the thing that we're looking at, the innovations that we're pushing are that intersection of that storytelling, especially during big impactful weather. And how do you blend together stories from our meteorologists that have very specific life-saving information with user-generated content that's on-the-ground storytelling to tell you what's happening really right now, to something more lighthearted, and what is the way that all of those things come together. So that's really where we're spending a lot of our time and are really excited about.
Yeah, similar to sort of the great storytelling, we want to partner with big producers, and we want to make as everybody does, you hear about, we want the next big hit. And when producers come to us and they pitch content, we either say, that's great, we've heard it before, or we say, you're onto something, or we really like that character. And so I'd say kind of at the backbone of the storytelling and what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to communicate across music is that we love big characters. And that production company is going to pitch 15 more networks that same day, and it's got to be the one that they're comfortable with and how you can market it and then translate it across different platforms.
So it always starts with the kernel of the idea, and we love loud characters. We would also love it if Luke Bryan would do a reality show with us. That would be amazing. Or Blake Shelton would take some time off the voice and do some things with us. And we do have some cool things cooking with those kinds of talent, because we do a lot for them as they do for us. So it's all about really good storytelling, but also trying to partner with bigger, louder, which breeds more expensive production companies and big ideas. And we're venturing into scripted, which is really expensive, and it's really challenging. You have residuals, and you've got finicky talent that are difficult to deal with. But you've got to stand out. I mean, you're trying to get across all these different platforms, across how many networks. When you think about, not only do you have networks, but you're competing with DVR and everything else content-wise. How do you get that loud show? And it takes investment. So that's something that we're trying to continue to put in front of everybody, that you got to pay more to kind of get more bang for your buck.
So I'm a believer there's no such thing as a new idea. A great idea is you steal a bunch of other ideas cobble them together and call it something new. So our business model is really straightforward. Laurie summed it up. We're subscription and advertising. We're currently about 70% subscription and 30% advertising. The subscription, so for those who know the industry, apologies, there's two flavors that are out there. There's direct-to-consumer over the top, that's Netflix. The other version is what's called authenticated, which that's you type in your Comcast or your DirecTV password and you get to watch. Your content probably is authenticated, I would guess. Weather's probably authenticated. We're in the OTT or direct-to-consumer category, so we're more like a Netflix. Like that.
Projected.
I can yell loud. As soon as I start yelling loud, the mic will come right up. So we're more like a Netflix from a subscription standpoint. The benefit of that for us is we control the billing relationship with the client. So I know every single thing when our subscribers are on, what they watch and what they like, and that allows us to tailor the product going forward and make sure they have a great experience. Versus the authenticated model, there's good sides to both. The good side of that is you get paid a whole lot of money from those cable operators. The bad side is they're the intermediary between the end consumer, so you have less direct data about your fan base. So that's our model. Our challenge is I can't license content. There's no high school content. And live sports is it's a fickle thing, so it's really valuable when it's live, and then its shelf life goes to zero immediately versus some of your content. Friends up. You have friends? I forgot to release you.
Can't say we do.
All right. What's the They just announced a whole bunch of stuff.
Friends the series, thankfully.
Yeah, Friends the series. No,
True caring.
Jonathan has no true, really. But
So sad but true.
an episode of Friends, the show, has a very long earning potential. It's great when it comes out live, but 20 years from now, it still has a lot of value. Ours has a very tight window. The second it ends, it's almost worth very little. Also, our market, each live game has a very small audience relative to what you see on TV. So scale for us is the inverse of what the normal TV market is. We have to achieve scale by a huge number of events. So we produce 40,000 live events a year, which is in the TV market like unfathomable. On the digital side, it's nothing compared to what YouTube does. So in our model, as we acquire content, we are very sensitive to the cost to acquire that content per title. Like a lot of folks say, oh, it's just $10 an event. That's $500,000 for us. So on that perspective, we have a unique model in that we create content. So we produce about 7,000 live games ourselves, but we also work with over 1,500 schools, provide them the platform, and it's actually the students at the schools who self-produce their own content. So we're a bit of curator. It's not quite UGC, but it's also not the typical model for us, because that model there, now what we're doing, it looks more like a software as a service model. We're providing the platform, but the cost of content creation is virtually nothing for us.
Great. I'm going to try this if I can pitch a question. So how do you guys know when you're successful? I mean, clearly, after the ratings come out, ahead of time, are there things you look for? Are there leading indicators for what you're doing and what you want to do? Are there things that you follow, whether it be traits or data or anything else? How do you know where you want to go? Are there tools you use for that?
I look for data to help me figure out what we should be doing and not doing, but also because we control that direct relationship with the consumer, we know every single activity. So we measure every single possible thing that we can and look for what's working, what's not working. But for us, successes depend on where we are in the life cycle. So the first 2 or 3 years, Our success was driven by how many exclusive rights we could lock up, because any sports business is built upon your exclusive rights relationship. So we now have about 90% of the rights in the U.S. locked up, so we've moved on from that, from a success factor. The second was about school acquisition, so getting more schools in the base, continue to churn out that content. We're about to cross the 10% of this market, so we have a lot of growth left there. But now we've switched our growth to the audience experience and monetization. So today we measure our success through audience metrics, which is views and time spent and amount they watched, etc. But also how we monetize that, or how successful we are in terms of monetizing that consumer interaction into actual revenue.
We also do something direct to consumer where we're looking at, before we do a show launch, we have awareness footage, or excuse me, awareness survey that we track. Basically, is an audience member aware of the show? And then we also track intent to view. So we usually, if there's an off-air campaign, and if we have even on-air tactics, like a lot of times we'll do sneak peeks, or we'll do a trailer, an exclusive first look from the episode that we'll try and seed out within 3 or 4 weeks' time, and we try and coincide it with our promo launch. So we're literally sending our qualitative guy out there to say, do you know what the show is? Do you associate it to the correct network, which is not always the case. Sometimes they know the show, and they're like, oh, it's a great show for MTV. And the third is, okay, so you know about it, you know where it's on, are you going to watch it? And we can cut demos that way. We can look across sort of the whole landscape. That's a pretty meaty way for us to see who's going to watch. And then we also actually focus pretty much the blocked cut of any episode, where we take it out, we go to key markets and we say, okay, what do you like? Are you going to stick around? We really dig into a lot of characters at that point. You say, do you like this character? Is this one turn you off, or is this a love to hate? Because we know that those are going to be some really key guidelines for people tuning in every week. So we get really we get into the minutiae of the creative a lot more. I definitely look at the analytics of it, but we kind of look as much as we can about the intent to view, and then we obviously go with our social folks in the marketing and we say, what are you hearing? What's the buzz? A show that we recently launched, we actually did the same kind of format, but it was a new cast with our show called Party Down South. And we created this great social kind of war between fans of the original cast and the current cast, and it was great. You couldn't pay for that kind of advertising, and the cast was out doing things with TMZ, and they were on Entertainment Weekly, and we're getting this great buzz. And while you can't really measure, does that equate to a rating or an impression of X? But you know that the buzz is good. So that's also an early indicator. Have your cast go out and break some laws. That helps a lot before you launch the show. You can't say that out loud.
I don't think that will work for us. On the mobile side, I'll say it's a little bit different than certainly on the network side, but we're very data-driven, like anyone else. The three things that I look at specifically are the percentage of our visitors who come in and actually watch videos, right? So as a percentage of the whole, who just maybe come in and look at the forecast and leave. The number two thing that we look at is of those times that our users are coming every month, how many of those visits are they watching video? So let's say they come back 23 times a month, and they watch video two times, right? And the last thing is, and then how many videos do they watch, right? And so each of those three things are levers that we can impact to drive more video views. But all of that data we have to look at in real time. What are the videos that people are really watching? What do they like? What are they watching all the way through versus starting and stopping? When you do have advertising in the mix, how is that impacting your views, things like that. So we're looking through all of those things to not only impact the content that we produce, but also how we're promoting that content within the mobile and the digital experiences.
So for our business, even though it's, let's call it a non-traditional platform, it's really traditional metrics. I mean, when you're developing a product or a network, it's all about meeting a consumer need and using that research to kind of build that brand. But after that, as it is with any business, it's about staying in business. So it's about profitability. It's about the ratings. It's about the revenue and the type of that revenue, meaning direct response versus general market. Is it just Geico ads, or is it also McDonald's and Chrysler and Walmart who's buying, and those CPMs? So very much more traditional broadcast cable metrics really help guide our business.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we're so new. Similarly, we're focused on building enterprise value. And when I look at that, I think about what is our business going to look like in 5 years or 10 years. And so, profitability obviously is a concern right now, but it's not the primary concern. But that is, again, one of the kind of 3 key pillars. The other thing is, again, producing extraordinary content, extraordinary entertainment art. And so one of the metrics that we've implemented is we want to kind of measure the award nominations and the numbers of awards, whether they're Emmys or, kind of visual Emmys or, Oscars, if we ever do a virtual reality feature. And then the third thing is just the learning and the growth of the organization. We're starting off, we have kind of 4 founders, and we're up to 7 people right now. But ideally, we're going to be as big as Disney or Turner, in the very near future. And so it really is important for us to build an organization with a very solid foundation that can sustain stand the test of time.
Great. I love the story about kind of provoking a war of sorts, and also I love the idea of the thunder snow and getting people to participate in this whole ecosystem. Guy, I read that you were responsible. You have the honor of working with getting the music cards at Starbucks. That every week I can get a new download. So how much of these ideas are ones that you're thinking in the back of your head, this is going to work, or just somebody, inspiration versus hard work and finesse?
Yeah, I guess I can talk about it. Now, I negotiated with 2 years, for 2 years with Apple. And the card program was kind of one of the byproducts of that negotiation. This was kind of pre-iPhone and pre-Wi-Fi, kind of pod even. And so we were looking for ways to go into Starbucks and reap the benefit of the Apple kind of ecosystem. And so, you could go in and you could hear the song playing overhead. This sounds really archaic right now, but at the time it was cutting edge. You could hear the song playing, you could see it on your phone, and you could push buy. It was fantastic. Again, right now that sounds like, kind of tinker toys, right? But at the time, it was something that was really profound. But we stumbled across, well, how do we kind of sell music in the stores if people don't have their devices with them? And so we stumbled upon this card program, and the thing that turned out to be kind of, again, almost a marketing throwaway idea ended up being the most successful part of the program. So it was, I think, chance favors a prepared mind, sort of, kind of serendipitous discovery.
I'm such a fanboy because I use that too. All I have to do is start streaming some high school games and we're good. One of the benefits of having your own company, which is small with a tight, lean, amazingly talented team, is that ideas come from everywhere. And yes, you're depending on national research and metrics for a lot of things. But you can also take ideas from the graphic artist or the person who's scheduling or somebody in network operations who has a brilliant concept and can actually turn that into something new, which you can do when you're in a nimble, small company. So I can't top cards at Starbucks for iTunes. It is hard. Thundersnow's pretty good, though. But what I will say is that it's certainly far more satisfying to have those ideas come from a terrific staff member than it is from a strategic planning department somewhere that you've never met in a city that you've never traveled to.
Yes, I can attest to that. Let's see. Innovation for us comes from a variety of different places. Thundersnow obviously was not planned, but it was a hit, and so we're very grateful for that. When we think about how we want to innovate in our products, a lot of it has to do with solving problems for our fans. And so if you ever have the opportunity to work for the Weather Channel, which I encourage you to do, you will find that your phone rings a lot and people complain a lot about the weather and the forecast and whether it was right or not and what does 10% chance of rain actually mean. And it's really interesting, right? And it's something that people are very passionate about because it does impact their lives every day. It gives you the opportunity to get creative, and we have a fantastic team on the 8th floor of the Weather Channel building. And every year, the whole company does a hackathon where the team gets together and ideas come out from everywhere, from graphic artists, from from meteorologists in front of and behind the cameras. And the teams get together, and for 2 days they hack on ideas, and those become products for us. And so they come from a lot of places, but at the heart of it, they come from solving problems for our communities.
I thought the hackathon was where you challenge people to break into your system, and because that sounds interesting. You know, we don't know. We don't know when we produce the show if it's going to work. We put a lot of money into it. We put marketing behind it. You start seeing cuts, and you scratch your head and you say, that's not so great. There's a show that we're working on right now that we started seeing early cuts, and we had to hire a script doctor for a reality show. So it was a very gifted story producer to come in and take what had been shot and kind of throw it up in the air. But you don't know, and you hear the expression, if you're going to fail, fail fast and move on, and admit that you failed. Admit, hey, we tried it, we were innovative, we took a risk, but it didn't work. Let's move on. And I've been in 2 Viacom budget meetings now on the 52nd floor with the head of Viacom, and we always go in there saying, here's what worked, and we did really well, and we spent the most marketing we've ever done on the show, and we hit 1 million+ viewers, and we got all these new advertisers who never before wanted to advertise in a show called Party Down South, and now we've got a huge amount of advertisers that you wouldn't think would be advertising there. But we also say, you know what, in this quarter these didn't work, and here's why. And I think you get just as many accolades for saying, you know what, we tried these things. We didn't just stay over here and say we're going to lean on our laurels and this is everything that works, and we're only going to produce this kind of show, and we're only going to produce this kind of tentpole. You got to look at the stuff that didn't work, because you talk about ideas coming from everywhere. You've got to be risk takers, and you've got to be innovative, and it doesn't matter if you're 21 years old or if you're 61 years old. You've got to listen to those ideas, and you've got to try them, because if you don't try them, you're not going to grow. So I feel like learning what hasn't worked is just as important with what does work, and as soon as you put the show out there and you look at the clock and you say, okay, go, and you wait, our ratings come in at 3:15, our Nielsen overnights, and that's when you kind of hold your breath. It's a report card every day. And that's when you know if it truly works, but you never really know. It's kind of gut, and you have a lot of really great creative people that say, based on kind of a formula for a good story and these loud characters and the focus group info, we really think we got a hit on our hands. And then you got to put it out everywhere. You got to be free, you got to charge where you can, but not worry about money necessarily at some point. It's about exposure for a lot of things. So I think we have to kind of look at all those things together.
I'll be brief because I'll echo a lot with John, because having worked in a large company where everybody gets stuck in your silo and stick to your lane, and now doing the opposite of it. Our best ideas from being a smaller company have come from cross-disciplinary stuff, where I made the same mistake, probably like, it's a marketing thing, so let's get the marketing team together to think about it, or it's an ad sales thing. Our best ideas come when we take folks from outside of those disciplines and put them together. We also tend to typically focus on the younger folks in our company, because they're a little bit more comfortable with social media than I am. They have a lot more ideas and experience. So our best ideas have come from that, of putting people you wouldn't think in the room to solve difficult problems.
Peter, I'll start with you again, coming the other way. Are there areas, so you had to raise money, right, at one point when you were launching, you needed to convince someone that this was a great idea. What was your biggest challenge in getting, whether it be your family or outside investors, to say, yeah, you got an idea, let's go with it?
Well, do we have?
You start.
Someone told me this, and not this piece, but I will say this. If you're ever thinking of starting a company, it's really similar to being a parent. Like, reading a book is great, and then you do it, and you're like, wow, this wasn't in the book. You cannot understand what it's like to be a CEO of a company of an early stage company until you do it. And I tell everyone I have one job only, to make sure we have money. That's it. So you said at one time, I'm always raising money. I spent most of today raising money, because if it's not about what we're doing today, it's about what we're doing tomorrow, the next year, a company we're going to acquire, or the next big growth initiative. So I am in a constant sales job with the right people, obviously, to convince them of why this is a big idea, and someone else would want to give us more money so that we can grow faster and do other things. So I would say, yes, you have to convince the family. Yes, you have to convince outside investors. The hardest part is you have to convince yourself. If you believe it's a big idea, you've got to be all in, because if you are even slightly tentative, this process will expose every flaw and weakness that you have, and you will crack. I have never done anything harder in my life, nor will I, than starting a company and raising money. Everything else I've done in my career is simple and easy in comparison. And there are times in the process where when you get kicked in the head, when you get told no 99 times in a row, but you go back in for that 100th meeting because, hey, you could flip the coin and this time it could turn up heads, that's when you know you've got an idea you believe in. And that was extremely difficult for me to learn, and extremely difficult for me to get used to that kind of failure. I'm still not quite used to it. I'm like everybody else. I hate getting told no, or hate getting told this won't work. But you have to have the resilience to keep going, keep fighting for it, and finding that one person who does say yes and let you pursue your dream.
That's great. I don't know if we have anything to add.
I'll just add. I'm just going to add.
Here, please go.
So I would just add, go to where the money is. I spent a year in Atlanta last year, and I mean, Atlanta is an incredible. There's an incredible opportunity here, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of kind of venture capital here yet. I mean, there is. There are some really successful firms. And so I would, encourage you to get kind of out of Atlanta if you're raising money, and kind of spend some significant time in Silicon Valley and in Boston and in New York. Someone described, I was describing my kind of my year here, and they said, I get it. Atlanta's not venture capital; it's early stage private equity. Atlanta investors want to see a totally different level of metrics than the Silicon Valley investors do. They want to see, everyone wants to see customers, or kind of projection, for where your customer base is headed. But Atlanta firms wanted to see revenues. Silicon Valley firms don't care about revenues. I invested in a company for Will Smith called Dog Vacay. The only reason why I invested in it is because I got shut out of Airbnb. And so, it's like they call it couch surfing for dogs. And, so I invested $25,000 into the Dog Vacay for Will, and they're talking about now it's hundreds of millions of dollars in valuation, and that was kind of in the early tens of millions. I don't think that would have flown in Atlanta. I'll just say that, So again, I think that the key message is, get out and go to where the money is.
I got one thing. It'll be brief. Who has kids? Okay. Do you remember what you thought parenting was before you had the kids? That's how easy raising money seems like before you've done it.
So I'm going to go on the other side. So maybe a little bit more. I can shift gears really easily. I was actually thinking about what are the things that you would like to invest in, that you'd like to see the industry adopt. Are there technologies, are there challenges that you're facing that, boy, if you had a solution for that would make your life easier, or it could be the next billion-dollar app.
So one of our challenges right now is, we're producing content, and there are just a few companies that make these virtual reality cameras. And so we're kind of having to sign, align ourselves with companies. I mean, they're really great companies, but we don't have a lot of choice. And so there are a lot of headsets. A lot of companies are developing headsets right now. I think, Oculus has them, and Samsung has them, and Zeiss has one, and there are probably 8 different companies that are developing headsets in some shape, form, or fashion, but not a lot of kind of the image capture. And maybe it's because it's not a consumer market. Although it will be. I mean, GoPro has shown that, and others have shown that. But that's what I would love to see, kind of like industry grade, cameras, and even consumer grade cameras that can record in 3D, 360, 3D.
So let me step out of kind of my business for a second and talk about something from just a consumer's perspective. Even though over-the-top and digital obviously is exploding and is going to be the way that consumers experience television, I would still like to see cable survive. And if they could simply come up with a more consumer-friendly way to handle authentication, it would be tremendous for everybody. So let me pass this down and try to spark something. Which is, it just needs to be easier. And actually, it's not from the network standpoint, it's really from the MSO standpoint. But it's certainly difficult.
No, I agree. I think you and I probably are in the same boat. I do think that's a challenge. It's a challenge for our users. I think if we could solve that for them, provide a seamless integration across all of your devices, whether you're watching us on TV or on your mobile phone or streaming on your tablet consumer, and so they don't go.
And I'll echo that too. The authentication is tough, but I want to get properly measured. Because if you think about the sample of Nielsen homes, it's like 16 or 20,000 homes that derive this algorithm that a lot of people in this room probably can figure out, but I cannot, how they measure it. And so when you think about, we created this great show, and here's the number, it could be an off day for a group of people in your Nielsen sample. You may have had 1,000 people that watched it online that you're not measuring, or you can see who streamed it, but you're not getting credit for it. So when you go to your advertiser, you go to a General Mills, you go to a L'Oreal, and you say, we've got this great show, I would love to be able to say, instead of this many people watching in this traditional way, we've got 100,000 people that watched it here. Repeats matter, and it's hard to measure repeats because it's not the thing that you go to and you record and you play back. And we got to get measured better. We got to get measured quickly. And there's a lot of people at very, very high levels in companies that are actually kind of pushing back and saying, it may not be Nielsen. There's other places, and again, lots of very, very smart people working on how to do it, but we've got to do it very, very quickly, because if we are all trying to make money and raise money, we got to be able to sell advertising at a premium, and we got to be able to show that will be seen in front of this many people, and that's a real number. It's not sort of a fabricated number of homes that's watching across all platforms. So that's a real issue across a lot of portfolio groups.
I'll be slightly provocative, or maybe a lot provocative inside our industry, and then I'll give you one outside of the industry that I'm looking forward to watching as an observer. Inside our industry, there's talk of authentication. I will say, I believe the cable bundle is dead. It's over. It's going to be a long death. It's not today, not tomorrow. It could mean, like, I still get the newspaper at home. I'm probably the only one in the room. So you can still read. Oh, there's some people. Go back 10 years, there would have been a lot more hands than that's going up. So there will still be people who subscribe to cable, but there is no growth left, and there will be a decline of that. So from the thing we cut the cord at home 18 months ago. And it basically wasn't because I was protesting or anything. We just don't use it anymore. And I looked down, it cost me $180. Like, we have 3 kids, we never watch TV, why am I paying $180? So I convinced my wife, let's try it for 6 months. You know what? It has not impacted our life one bit. Nothing. Zero. Saved a lot of money, by the way. I subscribe to Netflix, we have Hulu, and we buy stuff off iTunes occasionally, movies, something like that. So we're still spending money for content. The piece that's entered the market most recently that I'm fascinated to watch how it is Sling TV, which just launched. Not because I necessarily think it is the perfect product. I've subscribed to it. It crashes all the time right now. Just if you're watching, it's not great. But what's interesting is it's the first of what I refer to, I don't know, maybe others in the industry, it's a mini bundle. So it fits for me because I want ESPN, and it's my way to get ESPN. The Turner networks are in there, and oh my God, I don't know the other networks that are I personally subscribed because I wanted ESPN, and this is a way to get ESPN. But you can quickly see, in my opinion, others coming with other mini bundles. So here's a package for people with young kids, and it's going to have the Knicks and the Disney Channel and all that. And here's all these mini bundles, where again, an entry point that's more in the 20 to 30 bucks a month, not the 180 bucks a month. Because the problem is the network, or the business model that we all grew up with, that we all had great salaries, it was this whole, you got to get one thing. Like, there's one package, there's one thing you can buy. That's the only thing you can buy. And what we did over time is we just kept cramming stuff in there. There's more channels and it costs more. We've hit that tipping point where there's no consumer that really sees value for more than 10% of those channels. And if you can bring that price point down where it's not, you're not talking 180 bucks, but you're talking something significantly different, you're going to start to see, in my opinion, a significant number of viewers migrate more towards that, which will cause the whole model to change. It doesn't mean that people with great programming are still going to do well. There's going to be a shift in business models, but it's just, again, the thing that sustained the cable business for 30 years is going to rapidly change over the next 10 years. So that's inside the business. The one outside the business that I think will be the most fascinating to watch is, I think there is a looming fight over the time that you're captive the most that no one owns from a content perspective. And that's in your car. So I think the biggest fight over the next decade is going to be Uber versus Google. And I think both of those will become car companies over the next decade. They won't just provide services, but I would not be surprised if Google bought Tesla and basically viewed selling you a car as a way to push their products and services and marketing and advertising and content to you while you were stuck in your car for your hour-long commute to Atlanta.
All right, so it's thought of Google.
By the way, you'd never know that David ran strategic planning at Turner Broadcasting.
$30,000 bill of material many ways, especially thinking of driving my car and having ads come at me. So I want to switch gears and talking about that. So the monetization of content is a challenge. People don't like ads. Are there things you're seeing, new monetization models? Are there things to say, I can get more value out of this eyeball and that eyeball? Is there a way that we will pay less for content than now, either through our cable provider or through minutes of advertising? Are there new models approaching so I can still get my content without paying as much as I might for cable, or without sitting through lots and lots and lots of ads?
I mean, I would say, I don't agree people don't like advertising. I think people like advertising that is not targeted towards them. If I'm not in the market to buy a car, that car ad is a waste of time. But if I am in the market to buy a car, I'm actually very interested in not only 30-second commercials, but long-form commercials about it. So it's, again, another reason why I think the shift to digital is going to be so big, because you can measure people's performance and index that against a lot of data and actually deliver targeted and relevant advertising to them.
We were asked, I think maybe 6 months to 12 months ago, from our head of ad sales, if there was a way that we could start doing integrations differently. So not just that we're in the scene and I'm drinking a Pepsi, but really integrating them into the fabric of the story. And everybody in the room, the developers, were sort of shaking their heads. How do you do that without completely disrupting the creative and the environment and all of that? And there's pretty cool ways that people are looking at doing that. Because you don't want it so blatant that it takes you out and you turn the channel because you're so turned off, because the consumers are so savvy. Because if I'm not shopping for a car, I'm out of there. If I'm not shopping at X store and there's bags that are in the middle of the scene and they're trying to kind of blatantly hit you over the head. But there's some interesting ways that the producers, from the inception of the idea, are trying to incorporate different advertisers, and we're getting premium dollars on that. We do a show called Broken Skull Challenge that's hosted by Steve Austin, and it's basically, if you've heard of CrossFit, which I'm sure you have and you probably do, but it's all about CrossFit challenges, and it is just filled with opportunities for Gatorade and Nike and Reebok had that big Super Bowl spot. I don't know if you guys saw it, that they were all wearing CrossFit t-shirts, and it was talking about CrossFit makes you a better person and makes you a better mom and a better worker. It's ideas like that. CrossFit was so seamlessly integrated into that. And we're trying to look at ways to fold it into story, if that makes sense, without being so blatantly where you're sitting there wearing the logo of something. And I think you've got to think creatively, because you are going to get the dynamic ad insertion. You are going to get the person that's looking for the new sale on Guild.com while I have just left the shoe site. But you got to get it in front of them, I think, in a better way. You got to try it.
Yeah, so we focus on a couple of different things when it comes to advertising, and yeah, it's tough you've got weather.com and our mobile apps, we are ad supported, so you see a lot of ads within the experiences. I think there's a couple different ways to do it. You touched on one, is targeting. That's pretty critical. What we can do on the weather side is we know your location. You've trusted us with that information because we're giving you the forecast. And we know what the forecast is. And so we can tailor some of our advertising based on those two things, where you are and what the temperature is and whether or not it's snowing outside. And so that's one compelling way to target the message. I think the other thing is making advertising feel more integrated in our experiences. And that way they're not just these giant banner ads, billboards that jump out at you off the screen. And the more integrated they can feel and the more targeted the experience is to you, I think the more acceptable it is. And actually the click-through on some of those treatments are much higher. The last thing that we focus on, I think you also talked about, is more of those sponsored type stories. So again, if I know you're a pollen sufferer and you're coming to our site to understand the pollen counts, which is really important in the springtime in Atlanta, where it's yellow all over. It's always high is the count. But we have some really fantastic sponsorships that we just did with Flonase on allergies. That it was great for that advertiser. They were able to have an allergy tracker. It's very personal to the end user. It solves a problem for them, and then they can actually have, bless you, they can have some they can have some content too that talks about in general how you can improve your allergies throughout the year and have it be using their products.
You know, there's really no such thing as a free lunch. You have to pay for content somehow. If we look back at the music industry, we don't have to go back to the same analogy of, you know, what if Napster or iTunes. If iTunes hadn't come up with a way to charge consumers in a way that they actually enjoyed, then music would have collapsed. And certainly there would have been concerts, but there wouldn't have been the money to put out packaged music. Television is the same thing. I would love to tell you, there's a way to get great content without paying and without seeing ads. It's just not going to happen. Because again, if that existed, eventually the content would all look like a lot of what's on YouTube, which a lot of folks, young kids like until they get to a certain age, and then they're going to want something scripted more and deeper. You know, for us, our networks are free over the air to everybody, but we've got advertising because you got to pay the bills. And so one way or another, there's got to be that value exchange, but it's got to be done in a way that consumers welcome it, in the way that consumers welcome it with Netflix, or they welcome it probably with PlayOn, and they welcome it with iTunes. And I'm sure they'll welcome it with Oculus Rift.
Let me add one thing. I'll yell. So one thing I'll add to Jonathan. We all grew up in the industry happy. We appreciated 30 to 40% margins, profit margins. Like many of you might work in other industries that are like, that's like obscene. and that is truly, sometimes we had some businesses that were 50% profit margin business. But I will say, if you look at history, as technology disrupts, which is about to happen in the media business, or is happening in the media business, profit margins come down. So as companies, we're going to have to be much more comfortable with profit margins that are more in line with, as you look at other industries that have been, if you look at what's happened to the music industry, as you look at what's happened in the computing industry, the media business is not going to benefit from 30, 40, 50% profit margins going forward. So it won't go to zero because, again, people don't work for no profit, but it will dramatically come down, which means you're going to have to, it's going to be more about a top-line game in terms of growing your total overall revenue in order to maintain what that bottom line profit is.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. The other thing I would add is that I think that when digital DVRs came about, you know, the captivity was erased. And so people were free to watch what they wanted to, and they could pause and fast forward. And I think that you had to, you know, I think branded entertainment experiences, what you guys have been saying, are critical, whether it's pollen or music or what have you. You know, it's really critical. And what I've seen, and maybe it's just because I'm kind of new to the advertising side of this, and I did it at MSN, but kind of on the kind of television side, was that more creative directors are actually going into advertising. You know, so the stories are becoming a little bit more compelling, and so I think it's because the dollars from the advertiser are bigger because they're losing, you know, kind of the people on the screens. And so, Rob Stromberg went from, making $760 million on Maleficent, and then directed the Mercedes-Benz, ad for the Super Bowl, for instance, and so that's the kind of movement, that I'm seeing, with a lot of directors. And Scorsese's done it in the past, and, others have done it, but I think bigger names, more creative, big brains are moving into the advertising space, and I think that's going to be an ongoing trend.
I'm going to open up to audience questions. I have plenty more, but if you have one, I know we have speakers up or
Hand off the mic.
So just yell.
we're repeating it, so we're recording, so that's really, having a loud voice is great, but we also want to.
I got a question for David and Jonathan, since we're all in the broadcast business here and we have international affiliates that are here. How are we going to survive with the content overload that's out there in the digital space? You talked about monetization, you talked about storytelling, you talked about sports and virtuality, but everybody has a customized ad hoc what they want. How will all these international and local affiliates, or how can you survive in the near future when you're getting hit by so much content overload, basically?
I know David is probably an expert.
John, could you repeat the question?
I apologize. The question really was, with all of these platforms, when it comes specifically, let's say, to news, where you've got so much content, how will it be communicated and how will it survive and thrive? In other words, how will we save news, internationally and domestically? David may be an expert in international news gathering. I am not. But what I will say is that, like anything else, there is a survival of the fittest. Certainly the what I'll call the real news that I still treasure, that CNN is based on, will survive and thrive. And the platform and how it's delivered may change. And the amount and quantity and frequency of its delivery may change. But certainly, I believe that business and the other businesses that are built on true journalism and on informing and educating the public will survive. I can't tell you exactly what it will look like, because there are a lot of people, David included, probably 10 years ago, who were talking about the way television would eventually survive, and we weren't always right. Our crystal balls were not crystal clear. But there will always be a market for news, I'm sure domestically and internationally. It's like great content. It's just platform agnostic now.
I'm not an international news expert. I worked on the CNN side of Turner business for like 2 months. That was it. But I'll try to put it in some broader context. So while I made the comments that the cable bundle is dead, this is the golden age of video. This is, to me, what's exciting about this is this must have been what it was like in the late 70s when Ted Turner and the others were launching cable, and everybody looked down and were like, that's not going to work, or that's never going to be big, or and it ushered in a 30-year era where tremendous wealth and profits were created, and a great consumer experience was created. I think it's going to do the same thing. It will disrupt some of the existing models along the way. But if you look back, again, I go back to, if you want to, there's nothing new, so just look at history. What happened? The big cable companies became merged with part of the big broadcast companies. There will be some big players in the digital space that will come and will merge with some of the big cable and broadcast companies. So I think that the challenge is going to be, it's commonly known, it's the paradox of choice. We're going to be presenting consumers with an infinite number of choices of where they can consume content, news being one of those. While every consumer will tell you they want choice, at some point you reach a tipping point where there's so much choice you can't decide, and you actually drive consumption down. I'll put in the analogy, if you go into a grocery store, yes, I want a lot of choices of cereal, but if that's spread over 5 different aisles and there's every different flavor, like, at some point you're just like, forget it, I'll have oatmeal. That's too confusing. So we will enter an era where part of this is going to be about your brands. Your brand's got to stand for something, so part of it's going to be about the quality of content, but also it's going to come around curation. So there will be companies that emerge that help consumers find, and it's probably in ways we're not thinking about now. Curation a few years ago was just hitting the channel really quick and flipping through and seeing what's on. And this thing called Google came along and you could search for what it is. That doesn't really, neither of those works in this new, so there will be new technologies and new companies that come, and there may be companies, there won't be one, there may be dozens, that will be very micro-focused and says, if this is your type of profile, here, I will help you, I will serve up the content that you're most interested in. And news will be one of those things.
Yeah, let me just kind of take a quick step at that. I definitely am less of an expert than everyone else on this panel, but I've thought about this a lot. When we were at Starbucks, the value that we provided is we delivered a very targeted consumer. So we knew what they wanted. They love jazz. Jazz isn't anywhere else but Starbucks, for instance, right? And so I think for when I look at this, targeting is really important. I can't read ESPN's blogs because they're so racist right now. I mean, every other comment, there's a racist comment coming from one side or the other, and so it's unreadable to me. And so ESPN realized that they started a company called Undefeated that is kind of specifically for African Americans. And so now I can just, sports is supposed to be a meritocracy. I can just read about the merits of the sports. I can read about some of the angles of the sports, but I know I don't have to be subjected to the constant reminder that I'm, a black African American, right? So that's one thing. I think curation and discovery is the other thing. So the curation is really important, and kind of packaging something for a specific consumer, but allowing some of the data that exists from Google searches and from Pinterest and that sort of thing, so that you can increase discoverability for some of the content that you're developing. And then retargeting is the other thing. I think a lot of people that work in the SEO world really understand retargeting, and it's how they're driving their business, and there are billions of dollars of companies created on that on the backbone of retargeting. But that's something when someone comes and reads a story and understanding what the kind of keywords and what the what all the kind of the different touch points of that story are, and comparing them to the other 10 stories that they've read, you can understand what types of kind of news they like. I have to read. I'm a very kind of moderate conservative, right? So I read both sides of the equation because I want to know what's what's really important to the other side. What's important on the kind of the social side, for my kind of social, kind of liberalism, and my fiscal conservatism over here. I read both sides, and so there's nothing that exists for me. I have to create it, and so I think to understand the retargeting elements of the news stories that I read and give me very specific news, I think is really going to be critical going forward.
Other questions from the audience?
Okay. Hello. Better? Okay. As someone developing content right now that is a story, it's a really challenging time because on the old school side, publishing and film, it's not dead, but close to, dying to try to get anything made. There's just no money to be made in publishing. Can't get anybody interested in writing anything, developing anything, putting in bookstores are gone away, and so on. So it seems to be headed towards a new media, miniseries type things, and all these new content distribution channels we're hearing about. Yahoo, Amazon, Netflix is already there, others, but they're not really there yet. Maybe your own included, and mine is sports related also. So to try to get a sports story that's fresh and important, historically significant, made, it's a really bad time, it feels like, to try to get either the old or the new channels. And I thought your comments were interesting in terms of how to pitch, what is attractive in pitch. So maybe you might have some good comments on how to get something in the right place right now.
Well, one of the things as you were talking that comes to mind is we talk about user-generated content, and you look at all these YouTube stars that every network's going to or making big deals with now. And they're like, your stuff is going to translate to our linear television show because you were a sensation on YouTube and you had all these hits and you had this great little ecosystem that you built. A lot of those networks are trying to capitalize on that piece, which I think opens up a whole different door for people who may not be actors, may not be, most of them are not. They're just characters, and they sit with their friends, and they tell jokes, and they get, 2 million plus hits a day. I think with being on both sides, because I started in development, and I was the one both pitching and buying, I think it just starts with, you mentioned it, like you have to be in it to win it and be as tenacious as you possibly can, because if people come in and if it's an idea I mentioned earlier that we've heard before, if somebody's so passionate and they've got this great character, they've got this great setting, there's something there, and it may not be that project, but it may be, hey, there's something else we can work with you on. I think you have to be, as you were talking, I'm thinking, do brands matter anymore? Like when we look at brands and we try and think about, if you come in and you're pitching a home show to HGTV, or you go into MTV and you're pitching an 18-year-old reality dating show, I think the brands matter, but I think what translates across it is you've got to keep trying. You've got to just take the feedback. And I think it's also good to partner with production companies, because that's the best way to sort of glom onto an existing company that has networks and contacts and work for hire, and kind of get in that way. But there's, ideas are tough. Pitching is super tough. It's like auditioning. You talk about, you get told no 50 times before you even get called back for something. So I think you just got to be passionate and just keep going for it. Because again, as all these platforms get built and technology gets built, it's all about content. So I tell people on my staff who are super young, who are sort of like, what can we do? What can we do? It's like, that's being young is a premium, and then also the fact that there's so much content that's being created right now, more than ever before. So I think that there's more opportunities. That's a long answer for what you asked, but I think that you just got to continue to be tenacious about it.
It is. It seems like there's endless content airtime with all the networks, all the things, but the selection process, I mean, 99% of people want to say no. Like, how does anything get made?
Well, keep in mind, a lot of bad stuff gets made too, right? Oh, how did that get put on television? Every May.
Jack Black's thing at the Academy Awards, everything's Godzilla 3, superhero.
Yes.
It's all there's nothing.
Other questions from the audience? I saw another hand.
I think you answered this several times in some of your answers, but I'm wondering how you all see social media, social TV fitting in terms of discovery, in terms of awareness, in terms of building a audience that will bring it back into whether it's digital, whether it's broadcast, whether it's cable. How does that piece of the puzzle fit together for you all?
So let me repeat it just for recording. So social TV, how do you engage audiences in new ways that maybe...
Well, no, how do you see it fitting in?
How
does it fit into your overall communication plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we probably all have stories to tell around that. On the social side, it's interesting, right? Because it needs to be part of the overall story for us, the weather story, and that's great to be able to have our fans post pictures and videos of storms or beautiful sunsets, things like that. But with any social media, you have to be willing to take risks with your brand, and whether you have your brand on a video that you might not be really comfortable with, it is part of that challenge. I think that the key for weather is when we look at this is that's the truth. That's the man on the street. That's what's happening when there's really big weather, and we'll have folks all around, but it's the before, during, and after the storm where social really kind of tells the full story. And so for us, we integrate it throughout. In this last storm, I was participating on the digital side, but I got to act like I was on the TV side for a weekend. They asked for volunteers, and what we were doing is we were going through user-generated videos that were going to be played on the network. So fans had submitted a bunch of videos, and my absolute favorite one of the day, literally, was this a mother had sent in a video of her daughter dancing around on screen watching Jim Cantori when he was freaking out, and it was just absolutely hilarious. And I thought, oh, I don't know, are we going to be okay with this type of thing? And shared it with someone, and immediately the whole floor of the room, the producers who were all kind of looking at this, were hysterically laughing. They're all, did you see the baby? Did you see the little girl? Jim, oh, we got to do a side-by-side. And it was really fun to be part of that process and to see what was a hit within the room ended up being a hit outside as well. And that was a great experience for me, being more on the technology side and less on the content production side. But really, you have to take some chances on the social side to see what's going to really get traction.
I want to follow up with that. Something that came up when we were getting ready for this was the whole thought of something that was very hot maybe a year or two ago, and that's the whole idea of companion apps or having some kind of simultaneous experience. Is there a future there? Is anyone experimenting with that? You want to address that area?
I think there's a couple things that can be said. For me personally, I know when we look at our fans, they do sit and watch the TV, and whether they're our fans or just people in general, they're on the TV. They've got tablets, they've got their other devices, they're multitasking. Whether those two things are sunk up or not, don't really think so. But
I wish you had told me that like 3 years ago.
Right?
So we invested in a company called Starlink on television, and it was kind of a companion app, and basically your tweets would be seen by everybody, and it was time synced, and I mean it was beautiful, it was incredible. And we even tested it with, when I was at Overbrook, we tested it with Hawthorne, which was on TNT, And, we got data to participate, and it was just like every, the perfect storm, and then it just fizzled. It was like one of those hurricanes that, kind of,
By the way, there's people sitting here who worked on the whole Jada thing.
I'm sure. I'm in Atlanta, so it was. But the social television element just didn't. It never came to pass. And I think you hit it on the head. It's like they're doing something else. Right? If they wanted to watch television, they would watch television and they would be fully engaged. They're checking their email. They're not kind of, they might be tweeting about, you see it with Scandal. Scandal's the one that, I guess my network, my social network, it's nuts. People are like, don't talk about it, and I haven't watched it yet. I'm on the West Coast, and I'm going to defriend you, and all this stuff. So I think there are kind of certain shows, but I don't see the kind of real connection except through the existing kind of social media platforms. I don't know if there are going to be new kind of platforms that are developed.
Sports, though. Sports is somewhat different.
Yeah.
Right? Where people will.
Because of that.
Right.
Well, as a Seahawks fan, let's just say there's a lot of people on the stage.
Other questions from the audience? Yeah, we'll go back there and then come up front.
I'd like to hear more about the car. Why cars in your channel you won't drive them anymore?
I don't build myself as this expert on this stuff. This is, everybody uses Uber. It's like, it saves my life in New York. No, cars will migrate to self-driving. But even before then, it's rare I'm in the car without some little ones in the back seat who are clamoring for entertainment. So there's a captive audience with nothing to do there. And media companies and advertising are dying to find opportunities to find things where people have nothing to do and a screen where they can stick in front of their face. I'm not saying that's good for society. I'm just saying that's the business that we're in. So the car is the last remaining item where you are sitting with very little to do and a very captive audience that you can theoretically put a screen in front of. So, and there's an increasing amount of time that you're spending there. So just literally go through your life and your day, and aside from when you're asleep, and we'll figure out somehow to put a screen in front of your face at that point too. Think of the times when you're not in front of a screen that can deliver content to you, and that's really the last remaining beachhead for someone to conquer.
Is it a screen or is it more of a virtual thing?
Outside my expertise, I don't know. No idea. I think it will be, I probably shouldn't have said, it's content. So I'll give a personal story. I told you before, I steal all my best ideas. The ones I don't steal, my wife gives to me. So she everybody knows podcasts. I'd heard of podcasts, I don't know. It's like someone talks into a microphone and then it somehow shows up on your phone. That's as technical as I've gotten with it. So my wife is like, oh my gosh, listen to this podcast. And I was like, yeah, whatever. She said, just try it. I was like, when am I going to listen to that? She's like, in the car on the way to work. She's like, the kids are in the car. She's like, after you drop them off at school, you've got another 15 minutes while you're driving. Listen to it. Well, it turned out it was cereal, which I'm sure most people, holy cow. Like, not only did I sit in the parking lot to listen to the rest of it, I was done with the whole thing in like a day and a half. Like it wasn't binge watching, it was binge listening. So that experience right there showed me, talking about how screwed radio is, it is that type of storytelling, between that and what Spotify and those type of companies are, this personalized audio content delivered into the car, that is huge. So I've got a couple of companies I really like that are in the startup space that are specialized in that storytelling aspect. It's completely, that one show shifted. I don't listen to radio anymore. I subscribe to, 24 different podcasts, and if one story's not interesting to me, I flip to the next story, and that's how I entertain myself. So no, I don't think it'll just be video. I think there'll be audio. I think there'll be some other augmented reality or virtual reality as a component. Don't quote me on any of all this. I'm, as a consumer, waiting to see this, because I find it'll be very, very interesting. Because it's going to be the big tech giants who are battling over this.
Yes, okay.
If you can monetize around broadcasting about social media, do you think broadcasting will lean towards those type of shows and productions? Because currently you can't really sponsor news, but you can sponsor shows about what people are talking about on social media. So do you think we'll see leaning towards that type of broadcast?
I kept telling people, whenever I get a tough question, I would say, hey, David, what do you think about that?
John, if you repeat it for the audience and then answer.
I think the question was, you can't advertise on news, but you can advertise on social media. So will there be shows about social media that you can advertise in?
There already are, but you think there will be more?
Do I think there'll be more?
Yeah.
The kinds of shows today, at least that I'm thinking of, are really more TMZ-like. In that, and that's not necessarily what you would call news. But that's the way that people, unless I'm completely missing it, have monetized social media today. There's an episode of HBO's The Newsroom that this calls to mind. So I guess the real answer is, if people can figure out a way, in the same way that they curated America's Funniest Home Videos, to curate what's happening in social media, yes. To my knowledge, there's not a show short of, Talk Soup or Tosh.0 that actually does that. Am I missing something? Does it well?
I think just to add on to that, if you look at like a Watch What Happens Live or a Talking Dead, where they really make the fan at home because maybe from Kansas City is writing in or we just got this in. I think that is obviously a great consumer experience, but also can kind of tap
That's the
into
hard
it.
part.
But with news, I think that you've got to, it is hard because I think as somebody who likes certain content, news is kind of universal. So in terms of what people are tweeting about or, I don't know. I don't think there is.
Well,
yeah, you can invent it.
Actually, you should invent it.
So just an interesting parallel, and I'm not sure if it applies directly, but I never would have believed it until I saw it. So I have a friend, his name is Michael Siebel. He was one of the early employees at Justin TV, and then he went and founded a company called Social Camp. They sold it after 4 months for $60 million or something like that. And so he was riding pretty high. And then he went and did this company called Twitch, which I had never heard of. But Twitch does kind of video game content. And they sold it for $1 billion+. So and he's done all this within 3 years. So I think that what that taught me, and my son watches these Minecraft videos, which I don't understand it, but he's 8 years old, and what's the guy's name? Anyway, I mean, he watches this guy and this guy from the UK, and he just invests just watching these videos, and I think it's personality driven. So I think maybe that there aren't the right personalities right now that are credible enough to do news, or they just haven't caught on. But I can imagine that if they're a strong enough personality, and you kind of mentioned the kind of big, I can't remember your term, but kind of the big personalities, and if those people are curating news, I mean, Jon Stewart did it, I mean, for all intents and purposes. So I think that it just is going to take that one person to really define the model for that to come to pass.
Other questions from the audience?
You were each talking about the questions came in about the increase of content coming in from every angle across every platform. In y'all's decision making about content, whether it's pilot to development to renewal of a project, it'll differ obviously on movies and bigger budget things, but on the TV networks and on the smaller, how does that change your decision-making process? Do you go through demos and shows faster, or because there's so many shows, do you focus more on creating long-lasting shows? I almost like, do you fight against the increase of decreased attention span, or do you go with the flow of it and create shows that feed into that? That's my question and it might vary based on each platform.
I can give you an example of a show we're working on now that I think touches upon what you're asking. There's a talent that you guys might have seen on YouTube called Ed Bassmaster. He was in a Lady Annabelle video. He's got a ton of followers, and he just does these pranks. He gets in character, and he has, the gas station attendant prank, and he's got the supermarket attendant character. He has all these characters. So he comes with a huge, talking earlier about these talents that come from these YouTube platforms. So one of the things with him and with the launch is we're creating all this ancillary content that's going to go out to his YouTube channel. We're buying in certain areas. We're buying on social to kind of be a full 360 launch. So we're not just pushing the linear, but we want Ed Bassmaster to advertise the show across his YouTube channel. We want to create content, sort of bonus scenes or extra add-ons that the Podco needs to shoot for free for us that we can deliver as part of the show. So it needs to be a full, like everything at once across all the platforms. We're not sort of rolling it out on linear and then seeing if it's a good show and kind of, you know, a trickle-down effect from there, especially based on where he comes from, because he comes from that world. So I do think in that example, you would go all at once, because I think bigger and louder is the only way to get shows noticed, and you do need to put it out there all at once. So I think it is convergent, if that answers your question.
Yeah, so slightly different tangent on this for the digital side. The way that we look at it is that we do a very broad category of different types of video, short form, long form, within different category areas, even though it's all weather. There's a weather tangent that also gets a lot of clicks. So to me, the way that I decide what gets promoted within the applications, very limited space, even on our weather.com, but especially when you're talking about a mobile phone, you really can only highlight 3-4 videos and hope people click in. It's all about personalization. So it's all about having that broad reach of types of video content that we can actually produce, and then understanding what's uniquely Jonathan, what you look at, what you like to see, and feeding you more of those types of videos, content, and things like that, and especially what you don't like. So what really turns you off, what makes you scroll right past, what makes you click away or close the window. Those are the types of things, they may click for other people and be fantastic, but they're really bad for me. So let's make sure that we have a very personalized view on content. And when we can get to that point, then everyone feels like their experience is unique, and they're consuming as much content as possible. So slightly different angle, but I think it's very related, but you can only do that if you have a very broad set of content to work with.
I'm going to throw one last question out because we're about time. And this is very local. So I know, Guy, you had said what you think about sort of the investment community. So I think you're on point. I want to ask you all what you think about sort of the creative media entertainment space. Now, there's a lot of film production being done in Georgia. There's a lot of digital agencies, production houses here. There's a lot of fantastic talent. What do you see the future of for creative folks in Atlanta?
I take a very similar approach, which is someone needs to go out and find a film fund or a television fund and, you know, really bring that money into Atlanta, because even though a lot of production is happening here, the money is still in Los Angeles. And so, I mean, there are Tyler Perry and, you know, obviously Turner here creating their own content, but the majority of the things that are happening here are happening on someone else's dime. And, you know, I know Asante, you know, in the governor's office has been working to get a lot more money, but I think there needs to be, I mean, go to Dubai and go to India and China and really get some money to focus on producing content in Atlanta.
Certainly, on a bit of a smaller scale, you know, it is the end of an era to watch Turner shrink. And so you have marvelous folks who are incredibly talented and who don't necessarily have that large-scale company to turn to. They certainly can go visit weather, but otherwise they're migrating. You know, we joke that we're kind of creating Turner North, in that, you know, we've become a home for wonderful folks who have left Turner Broadcasting, and we're so happy to do it. But there need to be more companies like that in Atlanta to really support the level of talent, which is really high. So I have no doubt there are firms in town on the streaming side, on the over-the-top side, on, you know, video games and digital. But the skill set here, you know, if you could take the folks that migrated from Turner and you move them to New York or LA, there's natural jobs for them. It's too bad that there aren't more opportunities like we have for those personnel to stay in Atlanta, because there really are talented people here.
Yeah, I'd say just investing in the technology side, that's really key. That's where a lot of this growth is, on digital, on the web, on mobile especially. It's still all about great storytelling, regardless of the screen size. So focusing on things that will work within mobile especially, I think is key.
Well, I'm the best person to answer this question because I just moved to Nashville 2 years ago by way of Los Angeles. I don't live in Atlanta. I was born in Augusta, so I have a little bit of credibility. But what I would say about Nashville, since we are close, is it's obviously music heavy everywhere, but you've got a lot of those music labels who are also movie studios. So there's a lot of the film dollars that are coming in. And to your point, you know, the Nashville crew that shoots there is all brought in from Los Angeles, which is a sticking point. But there are production houses, more production houses opening. Rolling Stone just opened a big, a medium-sized office there. A lot of the agencies, CAA and the talent agencies, are also bringing in production folks. So I do feel like there's definitely a buzz in Nashville by virtue of the show that's made the city very popular, but also because of the music industry that's grown so much, and the need for producers who come from New York or LA who want to work, who want to create content. It seems like it's growing pretty quickly there, or quicker than it has been based on what I have learned. Even over the past 2 years, it's gotten to be a lot more robust there. So I think that's good for the size of the city.
So the Chamber put out a report not too long ago that said 10 years from now, 50% of the new jobs in Atlanta will be in companies that don't exist today. Not companies that move to Atlanta. That's been a lot of our job growth. But if you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, we touched on it. Turner's not going to get bigger. The big companies are not going to get bigger. I mean, Coke's gone through their reductions. But they're here to stay. There's going to be jobs there. But job growth is not going to come from the big companies. Job growth is going to come from the companies that don't exist today. So I personally, I raised money when the economy was in the tank. You remember that well, don't you? And so when capital was scarce, I mean, you couldn't scare up $1 in this town for anything. It's a lot better now. The economy's better, but Atlanta's become a more sophisticated market, so I would agree. There's, for every legitimate investment firm you can talk to here, there's 100 in Silicon Valley. So it's like, if you want to be an actor, don't be an actor in Atlanta. Go to Los Angeles. That's where you go to become an actor. But you can raise capital in this market. And I do believe if you take a 20-year horizon, I think Atlanta could become a third market for innovation. Certainly Silicon Valley is going to stay there. New York, I think, would be second. But I think Atlanta could get into the Boston range. And the reason for it is twofold. Actually, probably I'll add a third element to it. Number one is Georgia Tech. The amount of talent that is across the street that's being churned out for this economy is incredible. Number two, our airport. It is a huge differentiator. And three, we have pretty good weather. So, what scares me in terms of some of the brain drain that's happening now on the traditional media is where magic really happens is where you intersect creative people with technology. So and when I say Georgia Tech, I pointed out not just because I went to school there. We have great universities all throughout the city. Emory, Morehouse, I'm not mentioning the one up the road in Athens. But there's a lot of really great, talented young people coming out of this market. A lot of them don't stay here because the opportunity's not here. So what I'm concerned is we build up this great technical base. If we don't have the same level of creative base that's here, a lot of that talent's going to flee. 50% of Georgia Tech grads, when they graduate, leave Atlanta. And to me, that's a problem. So I kind of wish if we could keep the key talent on the media and creative side for another 5 or 10 years, I think that might be the intersection point. But if we miss the window, if there's brain drain on the creative side, then we're going to have a lot of technologists who can't be partnered up with those really brilliant, creative folks to spark the next very cool idea.
Great, thank you. Well, help me thank our panel.